Hey, good afternoon. Finn Olsen Tram is my name. I'm working for Philips within clinical pathology. You can see one of the devices we're having, but that's kind of not so interesting. What I'm also working with is of working with the portfolio, working into a waterfall governance model, applying different agile settings. Midland, would you want to add a few comments, or should I just continue?
I will just I will just quickly introduce you, and then Finn is Director of Project Management Office with Philips. His main tasks are rebuild of the PMO and project portfolio, team performance and efficiency, and portfolio and program management, change management projects, resource management and planning, agile portfolio backlog, lean execution, and much more. So I'm really excited to invite Finn Olsen to this conference, and your topic is I'm very much interested and curious to know about the agile backlog driven portfolio in a waterfall governance. So please continue, Finn.
Thank you, Ethan. Yeah, it's a lot of words, but I think what I want to get past to you is that there is a lot of religion in this area, but you don't need to be so religious. What you'll see that we've done here is that we've mixed it and gained some good results of it. And that's what I wanted to sort of demystify some of it, maybe give you a bit of hints what to do and reflect on. So basically touching the agile project portfolio, how we make it backlog driven, what does that actually mean for us? How can we at all do that in a waterfall context? So what is kind of the settings for our travel here was that we had a very typical standard collection of projects, well, too many projects. And then we engaged in this transformation using Catalyst, and then moving to the agile execution and the waterfall settings. So for you, it's probably very kind of familiar settings in the portfolio settings. You basically have too many projects. I call it project congestion in your where it's hard to meet timelines. You get into very evil spiral of exceptions, where the exceptions is actually taking over the life of the portfolio and not so much the projects that is in the portfolio. Sometimes who shout most, and all of these execution actually runs out in the sand. And that was kind of my starting point when I started Philips for this unit. So what we're moving into is more making it visible. And for me, it's that the PMO have an opportunity and engagement and responsibility to make this kind of internal marketing about making this stuff. So just drag on, talk about it, do something about it, don't be shy about it. And then going into the agile backlog. So for us, that kind of means that the teams need to be saved. What they were used to in the past was all of this sort of shouting, exceptions, and another thing kind of happened was to shield them for this so they could actually work and be efficient. So the cadence, we're not there yet, but we're moving into a 3-month cadence where basically you can't touch the portfolio unless it's really something special, but it needs to be solid. The team needs to work in this 3-month cadence, and then you can assess it. Are we still kind of doing what we want to? It's also to break up the work into what we call minimal viable products. Minimal viable products is what the software industry uses so much, but you can easily do it in other contexts. For us, it could be a hardware component, it could be a medical device, it could be whatever kind of things. That is more isolated. You don't gap over too much, and just kind of in a waterfall settings, you would call a work breakdown structure. Here it's a little bit different because with a minimal viable product, you really focus on something that makes sense. It has priority, is to deliver the first value to the customers, whether those are internal or external first. It's also about making not to start too much work, limit work in progress. Really be sure that you don't have all of those many projects or all of those subtasks going on at the same time. Allow it to be focused, and then work on priority. We started using a new kind of language too about milestones and gates, and that's kind of where the old-fashioned waterfall comes in. By practicing the language about milestone and gates, where we're saying milestones, this is where you really need to see that the clinical stuff, everything is kind of going. You have all your design history file updated, etc., etc. I'm looking at past completion, but all the time when you have these kind of milestones, events, you need to have another one, and we separate those in two, and saying, hey, we want to have gates. We want to be see. Are we still on track? Are we still on the strategy? Have our market changed? Have they been overridden by competitors, and so forth? Are the business case still sound and viable? Of course, you are totally up here during the session to write comments. Remember, there is a little bit delay before I see them. But it makes it more interactive for me if I can see if you ask for something or ask for something to be elaborated, so forth. And also just kind of continue. So for me, doing this kind of change, it's very important to have some catalyst or catalyst factors to make the transformation, because else you go and don't get the visibility, you go and get the marketing options and so on. And for us, it was really going in, the organization was used to in software to work agile, or used to work in the safe, scaled agile framework, but the rest of the organization was definitely not. So we simplified the language and removed us from this very, at least in the software domain, very religious use of words, and then selected a few that we kind of understood of. That would be, what is actually a minimal viable product? What does it mean of the definition of ready, definition of done, and so on? And transfer this to our own context. Start with the easy. Start with basically working with software where they were used to it, but look at where is kind of the easy stuff to do it, and then try it out. So you don't put up too much kind of huge battle for you where you make the transition. Use a catalyst. The catalyst here was really about, we had two catalysts in place. One was using the software tool. We already had one tool, but it was only used really for software. And we could easily see that this was moving forward and being easy to convert. We're using Jira from Atlassian, but it could be kind of lots of other tools in this case. We used also to use Catalyst from outside, from another division within Philips. So in this case, most of the things goes in Netherlands, and we got some Americans in who could just kind of go all the places and saying this is not sort of good enough, and get them as kind of disruptors, because else it was the same people, the same guys that had been working, most of them for 4 or 5 years together, and just to make a new travel, if you have no one kind of poke on it, then that kind of makes it difficult. So we both had kind of ambassadors and disruptors in. And some of the learnings we had to do this was, except we do baby steps. The organization expects that you're basically generating results from day one. You don't, but you do make steps forward. One of the things that was easily done was to focus too much of the tool, of here in the Jira for Atlassian, but it's just kind of catalyst. It doesn't do anything on its own. What it does is you have the right thing in it, you have the right portfolio data, you have the right data in it. So we're using still kind of most of the existing ways of working. Our QA system, our regulatory ways of doing things have not changed at all. But we're changing, let's say, the ways of working, just kind of different. How do we execute the work? You've heard that before. If you haven't management buy-in, it kind of won't work. I was just kind of saying, yes, indeed. If you can have the management in some ways, preachers. What do I mean by preachers? Have them on various town halls, informations. Don't get them to sort of overdo it either, but just kind of have a feeling that people knows, yes, there's management buy-in, we want to it. We had someone management that got kind of too much into it, and then you're getting from the staff, oh, just that's kind of too much. Find the balance about sort of pushing, but also leave time for execution. Now, what you saw from the previous slide is we had all too much work to do. And now with this catalyst and these things we're doing, we're saying, hey, there's too much work. We can't do it all in one go. Do the agile ways of working. I'll come a bit back to it in a minute. But it also meant we had to slap the fingers over some of those managers who were shouting, who were trying to do it, who were trying to go through, let's say, various channels into the organization and get their work being made. And this was kind of a very important factor to slap the fingers over those who is trying to actually misuse the system. And the misuse of the system was kind of the ways of working before. So a lot of pain was made, a lot of market plans had to be altered because we got really strict on the portfolio. A lot of things could not be sort of executed anymore. So that's kind of in the heads of here about accept the pain when you do the portfolio planning. So remember, in our case, we had a problem, too much work in progress. It wasn't stable, couldn't meet the timelines. We changed it so many times. And yes, we know that some projects, of course, is kind of getting all the focus. They're stealing things, but they may not be the ones that should actually have the focus. So it is healthy to put stuff on hold or actually just to remove it. It's totally okay. But this is kind of the difficult things. If you don't have the organization with you and saying too much work, yeah, I'm not supplying that to that market. I'm not there because we can't do it. Maybe in a few years we'll be there. It's really, really hard on the settings. And it also, in our case, we had to create a lot of investment made that just was kind of flushed. When we are flushing things, do it decent. Remember, we are humans. Killing stuff really hurts a lot because a lot of people have spent enormous time on those babies. So make sure you really inform why you're doing it, what is kind of happening, what goes on with the results you've made so far. Will they just be piled up and thrown on them? Or will they be sort of used in one way or another? We had many modules, I just call them modules for simplicity, that we postponed, but we could integrate in different other ways. So most of it have not been thrown away, but a lot of things what we didn't do or don't do is to attend some of the market plans we actually had. In the portfolio, there were already a fair amount of expectations on what we would generate. I call them fake business cases. So we had to update this. So basically what we came into was, before we had several clusters of ways of working, project 1, 2, program C, project alpha, beta, and so on. Some of those were compliance, some of them were strategy, other one was just catching up. And what we ended up with in this kind of transferred way was, yeah, we still see program C as the most important. It actually still consumes about 60% of the staffing of that organization, which is huge. But we also saw that Project Alpha is really about compliance, didn't have the space, and we had a significant risk of getting into trouble. Whereas the Project 1 and 2 was cancelled. It was Project 1 was really about catching up with legacy stuff, but in reality, it wasn't towards our strategy. So the Project 2 was what I call Mr. Important. He wanted this, he needed it, but when we were kind of going behind it, no, there was no kind of good rationale for it. So coming back to the agile kind of settings, what does it actually mean to make an agile portfolio backlog? Or at least what does it mean for us? Because all of these words are used in kind of our language in different ways. And I think that's kind of perfect for me. There's nothing that is kind of secret, holy thing about it. It's about making what works for you. And what made work for us was really to go with having priority always visible. If you remember kind of the settings we had, so kind of messy settings that who shouted most and other things. So our organization was really confused about what are we actually going to do today? What is the most important? Because you could see part of one department was working on one project, another one, another project, because someone came in and hijacked it. So the visibility was alpha and omega for us to make sure, and also that everybody could see it. It tended to be a little bit on kind of what was in the management team and understanding what the projects was. But we started putting them up before COVID, big posters here during COVID. It's been kind of on available on our SharePoint, but also used in various events where we talk about it. It's easily accessible, and the teams is kind of subscribing on these and getting the updates from the PMO when we make updates. It's only one page. It's colorful. It shows kind of what it is. Very easy to see what is there. And there is the most significant part. What is on this visible overview is what I call the red line. The red line shows what is above and what is below. And it's what is above is sponsored. It's on our backlog. It's what we execute on. And what is below the line is not being run, is on waiting stage. But it's good enough to have what is not in activity because it reminds people, we're putting focus on this one, but sometime soon we'll get to this one too. Don't forget it too much. It's also about the human aspect as when you're killing or delaying things, you can still see there is continuation. The strategy moves on, we'll still do something. So make sure that you can connect it and also there's acceptance of it. Priority can change. For us, it's extremely important that priority can change. Even we know that making, in my case, it's devices, it takes 4 or 5 years to get something on. But we do have other things that moves a bit faster. And even up to closure date of this medical device, we can still do different. And we do see, of course, within 4 or 5 years, the market change, and they change significantly. So it's good enough. The priorities can change up and down. And if you remember kind of in the good old days with the work breakdown structure, with the waterfall and so on, we made the specification for 2 years ago. We move on, execute, and then we test and validate and so on. Now we make these blocks smaller. Of course, we still need to do this standard thing, but breaking up the task and make sure we have limited work in progress. Limited work in progress is also one of those kind of agile buzzwords. So you can, if you want to play buzzword bingo, you can see quite a lot of those on the slide here. But limited work in progress means that you just don't initiate too much. You keep it as much as slim and fat activities. So you don't have one guy doing this, one guy doing another one. So 10 guys, 10 different things. Now you have more like, in this case, probably 7 guys doing one thing, 3 guys doing another one. So you execute the stuff faster. And yes, from BT here, we do still have projects and projects teams. They're just kind of organized a little bit different. Let me just come back on this one. Thank you for the question. So when we talk about estimation of work, we don't actually do it very detailed initially. We focus much more about what is it that is required for the team to start executing on it, and what is good enough, that is definitely done. And here it's very important that if it's software, you have a mock-up and so on, but if it's a mechanical thing, you get maybe it printed, 3D printed, so you can see that it's actually kind of working. Make it fast, and that's good enough for this iteration of doing it. So, and then we know that the world is not perfect, so you need to plan for the non-perfect. So most of this stuff that is in the first 3 bullets here is, let's say, our standard portfolio, what we do. But we also have the unavoidable. So we know no one is perfect, and so why not just embrace it? So we do have a Kanban board where stuff comes in to, let's say, on the left of our screen. Kanban board works with this, that you, again, you have only a certain amount, as should we call it, stickers. Maybe 10 stickers of assignments or interruptions, but you're not only allowing yourself to have 3 stickers in work in motion. The rest just have to wait. You can rearrange your stickers, that is in a waiting area, but the team can only get interrupted with 3 stickers during the time. That's difficult to keep on and don't kind of, at least for us with the organization we have, because we pretty initially got stickers overflow. Again, the exception came in and took over, so we had to do some cleaning and get it back on time. Software is kind of easy to do and work with. I think most, or at least of our organization, did it already. They all coming from school, kind of know of it. So here it was the focus on really not so much about making agile ways of working with Scrum teams and so on, but really focus on the word of minimal viable product and really focus on what makes benefits to get first. In a waterfall settings, you have maybe 100 requirements you need to fill. Here in this area, you still have 100 requirements you need to fill, but you filter the first 10 out that is really making the bang of the money and work on those first, complete them, because should you need to sign off and go to the market, or you're delayed, then at least you have the one that makes the most bang for the money. For the long lead items of development or research, so in the early stage, we know things is really unsecure. We don't know kind of what it is. There might be temperature, humidity, or kind of other things. So we use this burn down chart on the risk. So basically, we know in kind of a given hardware assignment for us, there's certain parameters. For example, it needs to work in Mexico above 2,000 meters and so on. So we need to go through these kind of things. So what we do early on is use this burn down chart. And so we can see how many of the risk are we removing. When we're down to 0 risk, we're good to go to the next step. So it's the risk that determine when we're ready to move to the next stage. And it's not, let's say, traditional deliverables about an enormous amount of documents and so on. We still need to do that in some cases, and we need to start working on the documents. But the documents is not the element. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that we actually see that we in our early stages is removing work. Coming back to the program project managers, so what I've had to do with my project managers to say you're not allowed to micromanage anymore. Here in the case of the software, we have Scrum teams. The Scrum teams need to work. The Scrum teams need to report on their velocity, on the things they do. So the project managers need to step back a bit and consume them as kind of black box. Of course, it's not totally black box. It's semi-transparent. And the project manager's assignment is to make sure they remove impediments. Impediments is this kind of, again, from the data buzzword bingo, the element where you remove stuff that makes the team inefficient. For our project managers, it's mostly about sourcing the the quality, the regulatory in and out at the right point of timing. They need to get some kind of early tick marks and saying, yeah, we're good to go. This kind of meets the standards, they work, and then we bring them in again a bit later. It's also about making sure we have the IFU updates at the right point of time and so on. So that's what the project manager is doing. So they're more sort of higher level organizing work, getting in and getting out, whereas they don't spend as much time on actually working with the teams. We expect the teams is doing what they do, what they have to do. It's hard for the teams also. They're reaching an enormous amount out to the project managers. And initially we did a lot of, let's say, standard work, but we're also moving our sort of distance a little bit more back to the level of more program level where we're building the blocks of things. So a quick wrap up. For me, yes, you can definitely mix the thing. For me, use the agile concept of ranking. Be sure you only have one backlog, one list of portfolio projects you have, and be sure you stay focused on this. Use the principle about don't sort of interrupt them. You can happily reorganize and reprioritize things on your backlog and your priority of portfolio, but just don't put them in execution unless it happens in the quarterly interval. You could still, of course, use problem-solving FMEAs and so on in your execution. There's nothing that prevents for you to do. There's nothing that prevents you to have your standard quality assurance model of getting through the different phases of different things. You can easily still work agile within the loops. It's just about organizing work. It's more about working about how the work is being made. For us, it's also select the model that is most efficient for the purpose. So Scrum is effective for software, but it has no bearing in kind of when we talk about hardware development, and doesn't have a bearing for kind of the early phase of research and so on. So we use more Kanban boards, or we're using simply burn down the risk. So select what is efficient for the purpose. Yeah, again, the portfolio, I won't say kill, but it's kind of close to it. Get the momentum to get realistic. Use your graphical means to show what it is. Use the graphical means of the backlog of listing priority to communicate. We're actually doing these items because they're related to strategy. The rest is kind of off. And how did we kind of doing? We were trying to use that as a transition using Catalyst. We didn't change the environment. We didn't change the quality management system. It was more kind of way of working. And then remember that we're all human. So Andrea is asking, have you been able to get some feedback? And this was a lot. Of course, the organization was saying, what goes on here? You can't mean this. The most pushback we had was from basically our sales organization, because they have been, should we say, successful to stuff the portfolio with enormous amount of stuff, single customer demands and other things. And they actually believed we would do it. But we had a track record of several years of not meeting milestones or any kind of things. So eventually they got happy. They knew kind of what they're getting. They're getting more assurance that what we deliver is actually, or actually we deliver on what we say. One of the big thing was my own team about what Bede is also asking about. The project managers kind of reprogram their mindset about certain things. So that's been kind of one of the main things. Mitchell, I'm used half an hour now. I could talk for time, so you better stop me.
Thank you, Finn, for this very, very invaluable presentation. Lots of points. I just want to make sure, did you answer Peter's question regarding the fatigue of developers?
Oh, I didn't see that. How long do your teams?
Okay, so yeah, how long are your teams agile? One of the drawbacks is a fatigue of the developers. Have you experienced this?
Yes. So not for if we only seen it with the software teams, it is, let's say, standard in the industry to talk about some of the sprints to make them into self-studies and other things. In our case, it's been made a little bit different because it's actually been swapping between some task assignments. But it is very important to think about this because it is a high pressure mode you're setting up and people can be fatigued. So I recognize the problem. Thanks, Peter, for making this point.
Great. Thank you, Finn, for your answer and a really wonderful presentation. Lots of points to take away. Like I know that we should simplify language. We should use catalysts for transformation, and even tools can be used as a catalyst. Regulatory ways can remain the same, but what really changes is how we execute work. Killing babies or work done in the past hurts, but make sure you have the right argument. Priorities should be always made visible at all times. Don't allow others to hijack your priorities. Project managers can step back a bit, and they should be more doing facilitation kind of role, where they're like more removing impediments, things that slow down the organization, and be limited with your working progress for a slim and faster execution of work. So wonderful, wonderful points. And thank you, Finn. We'll continue with the panel discussion. So we'll get backstage for a minute and we'll be back with everyone. So see you later, everyone. And yeah, Finn, let's go to the backstage.